A tiny fabric-covered plane was never supposed to hunt German tanks. It had no armor, no machine guns, no bombs, no real speed, and its engine was weaker than some modern motorcycles. But in September of 1944, one American pilot looked at that little observation plane and decided it could do more than watch men die. His name was Major Charles Carpenter. Before the war, he was a high school history teacher from Illinois. In France, soldiers called him something else, Bazooka Charlie, because he took a Piper L-4 Grasshopper, a slow observation aircraft made for spotting artillery, and bolted 6 bazookas to its wings. Other pilots thought it was suicide. Mechanics wondered if the rocket exhaust would set the fabric wings on fire. Officers questioned whether the tiny plane could even fly with the extra weight. But Carpenter had spent months circling above battlefields while American Sherman tanks burned below him. He had watched German Panthers strike from long range. He had watched American crews bail out of flaming tanks. He had watched men die while he sat above them with binoculars and a radio. And eventually, watching was not enough. So he turned his harmless little plane into a tank hunter. Then he flew straight at German armor, at treetop height, through rifle fire, through machine gun fire, with rockets under his wings, and almost no chance of surviving a direct hit. This is the story of Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter, the teacher who attacked Panther tanks in a 65-horsepower observation plane, the pilot who turned a Grasshopper into Rosie the Rocketer, and the man who proved that sometimes the craziest ideas on the battlefield is the one that saves lives. Before Charles Carpenter became a legend in the skies over France, he was not a fighter pilot. He was not a tank ace. He was not the kind of man anyone expected to become famous for hunting German armor. He was a teacher, a history teacher. He taught young people about battles, campaigns, armies, and leaders. Then the war took him from the classroom to Europe. In the Army, Carpenter flew the Piper L-4 Grasshopper. It was the military version of the Piper Cub, small, slow, light, silent. Its job was observation, spot enemy movement, watch roads, night find artillery targets, call in corrections, help commanders understand what was happening beyond the next ridge. The L-4 was not built to fight. German soldiers usually did not fear it. It was too small to look dangerous, too slow to seem threatening, too lightly built to survive serious fire. Most L-4 pilots tried to stay above the battlefield, not inside it. That was the standard job. Observe, report, stay alive. But Carpenter was not satisfied with being only a witness. He saw the Battle of Arracourt unfolding below him. He saw American armored units stretched thin across French farmland. He saw German tanks pushing through fog, fields, and villages. And he saw the terrifying advantage German armor could have in the right conditions. A Panther could kill a Sherman from far away. The Sherman often had to get dangerously close to fight back. That meant American tank crews were being asked to survive the gap between German range and American killing distance. Many did not. Carpenter watched from above. And the more he watched, the more he wanted to strike back. The idea was not completely born from nothing. Other pilots had experimented with mounting bazookas on observation planes. Some had used them against trucks or light targets. But Carpenter wanted something more dangerous. He wanted tanks. The problem was obvious. A bazooka was an infantry anti-tank weapon. It was made to be carried by a soldier, aimed from the ground, and fired at short range. It was not designed to be bolted to the wing struts of a fabric airplane. The L-4 was tiny. Its engine produced only about 65 horsepower. Its payload margin was small. Every extra pound mattered: a pilot, fuel, radio equipment, rockets, launch tubes, mounting hardware. All of it added weight. Too much weight could make the plane sluggish. Too much drag could make it harder to climb. Too much imbalance could make it dangerous to control. And there was another problem. The L-4's wings were fabric. Bazooka rockets produced intense exhaust. If the flame hit the wrong place, the aircraft could catch fire in the air. No one could guarantee it would work. That did not stop Carpenter. He found men willing to help. They mounted 6 bazooka launchers on the plane, 3 on each side. The launchers were fixed to the wing struts. Wires ran back to switches in the cockpit. Carpenter could fire one at a time or in groups. The result looked ridiculous. A tiny spotter plane with anti-tank rockets under its wings. Someone named it Rosie the Rocketer. The name sounded playful. The mission was not. The first time Carpenter took the modified aircraft into combat, everything was uncertain. Nobody knew how the L-4 would handle in a dive with rockets attached. Nobody knew how accurately the bazookas could be aimed from the air. Nobody knew if the rocket exhaust would damage the plane. Nobody knew if German infantry would simply shoot him down once they realized what he was doing. The only thing Carpenter knew was that German armor was moving, and American soldiers needed help. On September 20th, 1944, fog covered the battlefield near Arracourt. That fog mattered. German tanks used it for concealment. American defenders could lose sight of enemy movement until the armor was already too close. Carpenter took off anyway. The little plane struggled under the added weight. It climbed slower than normal. It handled differently. The bazooka tubes created drag. The rockets pulled at the wings. Rosie the Rocketer was no longer just a gentle observation aircraft. It was heavier, rougher, more unstable. But it flew for a while. Carpenter could see almost nothing below him. Fog covered the fields. He circled, waited, searched. Then the fog began to break. Through the gaps, he saw roads, trees, fields, and movement. German tanks, Panthers, advancing toward American positions. Carpenter had found his target. Now he had to do the insane part. He had to attack. A Panther tank was not an easy target. It was heavily armored, deadly against American tanks, and surrounded by infantry that could fire rifles and machine guns at low-flying aircraft. Carpenter's L-4 was slow enough that a determined rifleman had a real chance of hitting it. He did not have armor plate to protect him. He did not have self-sealing fuel tanks. He did not have a powerful engine to escape quickly. He had fabric, wood, steel tubing, and nerve. To aim the bazookas, Carpenter had to aim the entire aircraft. He could not point the rockets separately. He had to dive at the tank, line up the plane, get close, very close, then fire. Too far away, and the rockets could miss, too low, and he might not pull out, too slow, and German fire could tear him apart. Carpenter climbed into position. He placed the sun behind him. Then he pushed the nose down. The Grasshopper began to dive. The speed increased. The airframe vibrated. The bazooka tubes screamed in the wind. The Panther grew larger in front of him. Carpenter waited. Closer. Closer. Then he fired. The rocket ignited with a violent blast. Flame shot backward from the launcher. The little plane shook. Carpenter pulled up hard. Below him, German infantry opened fire. Rounds snapped past the cockpit. Some punched through fabric. Carpenter kept climbing. When he looked back, smoke was rising from the Panther. The tank had stopped. It was not a clean battlefield movie explosion, but it was out of the fight. The bazooka plane had worked, and from that moment, German soldiers no longer ignored the little cubs. Carpenter returned to base. The ground crew saw the bullet holes first. Then they saw the empty launcher. The wing fabric was scorched near the bazooka tube, but it had not burned through. The plane had survived, barely. The concept had been proven, not perfectly, not safely, but enough. Carpenter wanted to go back. The crew reloaded the launchers. New rockets slid into the tubes. The little aircraft was patched and prepared. Some men still thought the whole thing was madness. Carpenter saw it differently. It was effective, and effectiveness mattered more than comfort. Soon, he was in the air again. The fog had mostly cleared now. The feather mostly degrees improved. German armor was easier to spot. That also meant Carpenter was easier to see. This time, the German troops knew what he was. They knew the little observation plane could attack. They knew those tubes under the wings were dangerous. They were ready for him. Carpenter found another German formation. More Panthers, more infantry, more vehicles. He moved into position and attacked again. The dive was dangerous. The German fire came earlier this time. Tracers reached up toward him. Bullets struck the airframe. One round hit near the engine. Another tore through the tail. Carpenter fired. A Panther stopped. He turned for another pass. More fire rose from the ground. He fired again. This time the tank burned. Not just immobilized, dyed flames poured from the hatches. But Rosie the rocketer was taking damage. The rudder felt delayed. The tail fabric was torn. The engine was still running, but not perfectly. A cautious pilot would have returned to base immediately. Carpenter did turn west, but before he could get back, a radio call came in. American soldiers were trapped. The message changed everything. A small American waterpoint crew was trapped east of Arracourt. Around 20 men. No heavy weapons. German Panthers were closing on their position. Artillery could not safely help. Other air support was not available. They needed help immediately. Carpenter had a damaged aircraft, limited fuel, rockets still under the wings, a rough-running engine, and a very obvious choice: return to base and survive, or turn toward the trapped Americans and risk everything. He turned toward them. When he arrived, he saw the situation clearly. American trucks were in a small clearing. Men were taking cover behind vehicles. German tanks were advancing from the northeast. Infantry moved with them. The Panthers were closing fast. The trapped Americans were firing rifles at armor. It was desperate. It was almost useless. The Germans saw Carpenter coming. They stopped. They scattered infantry into firing positions. They pointed weapons skyward. This would not be a surprise attack. This would be a fight, and Carpenter was flying a damaged observation plane made of fabric. He climbed, circled, looked for an opening. Then he armed the rockets. If he could not stop the tanks, those Americans on the ground might be overrun. So Carpenter began his attack. The first dive was rough. The damaged rudder made the aircraft unstable. The elevator response was not right. The plane shook as it descended. German infantry fired earlier than before. They had learned his attack pattern. Tracers rose into his path. Carpenter fired 2 rockets. They exploded near the lead Panther close, but not enough. The tank kept moving. The plane pulled up slowly, too slowly. Bullets struck the aircraft again. The engine began to run hotter. Oil pressure became a concern. The aircraft was getting worse. Carpenter had to change tactics. The Germans expected him to attack from altitude, so he dropped low, very low. He used trees and terrain to hide his approach. Instead of diving from above like before, he came in from a lower angle. The Germans had their guns pointed toward the sky. Carpenter came from beneath their expectations. He popped up, nosed over, and attacked the lead Panther again. This time, 2 rockets struck. One hit near the turret ring, another hit the engine deck. The Panther stopped. Flames burst from the rear. The crew bailed out, died. Carpenter did not climb away high. He stayed low and turned toward the next tank. The Germans were confused. Their fire was not coordinated. They had expected one pattern. Carpenter gave them another. He fired again. 1 rocket missed. Another hit the side of the Panther. The shaped charge penetrated. A secondary explosion followed. The turret shifted from the blast. Another tank was burning. 2 Panthers were down. But 2 more were still moving toward the Americans. And Carpenter's plane was dying. The engine was now shaking badly. Oil smoke trailed from the cowling. The temperature gauge was deep in the danger zone. The tail felt loose. The fabric was torn. The controls were getting worse. Carpenter had only moments left before the plane failed completely. He attacked again. 1 rocket hit a Panther's track. The tank slewed sideways and stopped, immobilized. Its gun could still work. Its crew could still fight. But it was no longer advancing. That mattered. The last Panther was still moving. It was close enough to the American position that 1 high explosive shell could kill many of the trapped men. Carpenter saw the tank turn its turret. He saw the Americans taking cover. He saw time running out. Then his engine seized. For a second, the propeller stopped. The world went quiet except for wind. Then the engine caught again, grinding, clattering. Dying but still alive. Carpenter armed the remaining rockets. He came in lower than ever. The Panther was partly protected by terrain, but from Carpenter's angle, he could see the side of the hull. Thinner armor. A real chance. The German commander saw him too late. Carpenter fired everything. 3 rockets launched almost together. The recoil nearly tore the aircraft off balance. The Grasshopper rolled violently. Carpenter fought the controls. The wing Held, the rockets struck. One hit the turret side. One hit the upper hull. One smashed into the track. The Panther exploded from the inside. The turret came apart. Secondary explosions followed. The last tank was dead. The trapped American soldiers were still alive. Now Carpenter had to get home. Rosie, the rocketer, was barely flying. The engine was overheating. Oil covered the windscreen. The airframe was torn. The wings were damaged. Fuel was leaking or running low. Carpenter turned west toward the airstrip. He was only a few miles away. But that distance might as well have been an ocean. The engine made terrible sounds. Metal rattled inside the cowling. The temperature gauge no longer meant much. The plane was wounded beyond safe flight. Then the engine stopped again. This time, it did not restart. Silence. No power. No second chance. The Grasshopper became a glider, a bad glider, damaged, heavy, torn, and descending fast. Carpenter trimmed for the best glide he could manage. He aimed for the airstrip. But he was too low. The runway was in sight. Ground crews were clearing it. Men could see him coming. But the glide path would not reach. He needed altitude he did not have. So he chose a field, plowed earth, soft ground, bad for the landing gear, better than trees. The Grasshopper came down, tail wheel first. Then the main gear, the soft ground grabbed the wheels. The aircraft flipped forward. It came to rest upside down. Carpenter hung in his harness. Fuel leaked around him. The engine was hot. The plane could burn at any moment. He released the harness, dropped inside the inverted cockpit, kicked at the door. It was jammed. He kicked harder. The door broke free. He crawled out, rolled away, then his legs finally gave out. He had survived. Rosie the rocketer had not. The mission had cost one aircraft, but it had stopped German tanks. It had saved trapped Americans. And it had proven something unbelievable. A tiny observation plane with bazookas could kill armor, not easily, not safely, not reliably for ordinary pilots. But in the hands of Charles Carpenter, it could be done. The Battle of Arracourt continued. German forces committed large numbers of tanks and assault guns. American armored units fought from concealed positions. Terrain, surprise, gunnery, and air observation all mattered. The Germans lost heavily. Carpenter's attacks were only one part of the battle, but at critical moments they disrupted German movement and gave Americans on the ground a chance. After September 20th, German troops changed how they treated L-4s. Before Carpenter, many ignored them. They were just spotter planes, annoying, maybe. Dangerous, only because they could call artillery. After Carpenter, every little cub with tubes under its wings became a threat. German infantry fired on them. Tank commanders watched the sky. The harmless observation plane had become psychological pressure. That is the strange power of battlefield improvisation. It does not always need to destroy the entire enemy force. Sometimes it changes what the enemy must fear. Carpenter kept flying. He received another L-4, Agon. It carried bazookas. Again it was called Rosie the Rocketer. And again he went hunting. Carpenter flew more attack missions. Official records credited him with destroying multiple tanks and armored vehicles. Witnesses sometimes claimed even higher numbers. Exact counts were difficult. He often attacked behind enemy lines. Smoke, confusion, and battlefield movement made confirmation hard. But no one doubted that he fought with extraordinary aggression. He became known as Bazooka Charlie. The Germans reportedly called him the Mad Major. It fit. He was a man flying a tiny fabric plane at German tanks, but there was method inside the madness. Stay low. Attack fast. Use surprise. Never give them a clean shot. Do not fly like they expect. Do not be where their guns are already aimed. That was his logic. He understood that the L-4 could not survive a fair fight, so he made the fight unfair. He attacked from odd angles. Used fog. Used terrain. Used the enemy's assumptions against them. He did not try to make the Grasshopper into a true attack aircraft. It was not one. He used it as a tool for moments when no other tool was available. That is why the story matters, not because every L-4 should have been turned into a bazooka plane. Most pilots who tried similar ideas abandoned them. The risk was enormous. The margin for error was almost nothing. But Carpenter was willing to accept that risk when men on the ground needed help. Then the war delivered an enemy no bazooka could destroy. In 1945, Carpenter became ill. Doctors diagnosed him with Hodgkin's disease. At the time, that diagnosis often sounded like a death sentence. Army doctors gave him only a short time to live. He had survived anti-aircraft fire, German tanks, damaged aircraft, forced landings, combat missions that should have killed him. But now, disease threatened to do what enemy fire had not. Carpenter returned to the United States. He went back to teaching, back to classrooms, back to history, back to students who may never have fully understood what their teacher had done in France. Doctors had given him 2 years. He lived far beyond that. Year after year, he kept going. He taught for decades. The same stubbornness that carried him through combat seemed to carry him through illness. Charles Carpenter died in 1966. He was only 53. But he had outlived the prediction by many years. Long after the war, the story of Rosie the Rocketer nearly disappeared. Then historians found the aircraft. The L-4, connected to Carpenter's story, had survived in civilian life. For years, many did not know what it had been. Eventually, it was identified. Restoration efforts began. The little plane that had once attacked Panther tanks would fly again. That feels fitting, because Rosie the Rocketer was never just an aircraft. It was proof that one person's refusal to accept helplessness can turn a fragile machine into a legend. Charles Carpenter's story is not about perfect engineering. It is about action. The Piper L-4 was not meant to kill tanks. The bazooka was not meant to be fired from a fabric observation plane. The plane was overloaded. The exhaust could have burned the wings. The controls became sluggish. The engine could barely manage the added weight. Every attack exposed Carpenter to rifle and machine gun fire. On paper, the idea was terrible. But war is not fought only on paper. War is fought in moments when men are trapped and no perfect answer arrives. That was Carpenter's world. He saw American soldiers in danger. He saw tanks moving. He saw that ordinary observation was not enough. So he acted. Maybe that is why the story still hits so hard, because he had every reason not to do it. He could have stayed high, called coordinates, waited for artillery, protected his aircraft, protected himself. That would have been reasonable. Instead, he flew low. He attacked. He turned a grasshopper into a weapon. And for the men he saved, that unreasonable choice made all the difference. Most people remember World War II through famous aircraft. Mustangs, flying fortresses, Spitfires, Thunderbolts, Lancasters. They remember the great fighters and bombers. But sometimes a war story belongs to a tiny plane that should never have been in a fight at all. A little Piper Cub with fabric wings, a small engine, 6 bazookas, and a history teacher in the cockpit. Charles Carpenter was not supposed to hunt Panthers. The L-4 was not supposed to scare German tank crews. Rosie, the Rocketer, was not supposed to survive even one serious attack run. But for a few critical months in 1944, it did. And the Germans learned to look up when they heard a Cub overhead, because the harmless little spotter plane might not be harmless anymore. If Bazooka Charlie's story deserves to be remembered, hit the like button. Scoosber for more forgotten World War II stories, because some heroes do not fly the biggest machines. Some take the smallest plane on the field, bolt rockets to the wings, and dive straight at the tanks everyone else fears.